The bus rumbled down 55th Street, its windows fogged slightly from the heat inside and the cool October air outside. It was one of those late afternoons where the sun hung low, but still managed to cut through the city grime, casting long shadows across cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights. Inside, the usual mix of people filled the seats, some scrolling on phones, others dozing off, a few staring blankly out the window like they were watching their own thoughts drift by. Near the middle, by the second set of windows, sat a woman in navy blue scrubs. Her dark curls were pulled back into a loose bun, a few strands escaping around her face. She leaned her head against the glass, eyes half closed, not asleep but close to it, the kind of tired that doesn't come from just one long day, but from weeks of showing up, holding space, and giving more than you get back. She'd just finished a double shift at the neighborhood health clinic, a place where the waiting room was always full, the coffee always weak, and the staff always stretched thin. But she never complained. Not out loud anyway. She wasn't looking for trouble. Not today. Not ever, really. All she wanted was to get home, take off her shoes, maybe heat up some soup and sit in silence for a while. Silence was rare these days. Between patient calls, neighbor check-ins, and her younger cousin's endless questions about college applications, quiet felt like a luxury. But trouble doesn't always ask before it shows up. From the back of the bus, laughter rose, too loud, too sharp. A group of men had boarded a few stops earlier, all wearing leather vests, boots scuffed from miles of road, and the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. Most kept to themselves, but one stood out. He wasn't the biggest, but he carried himself like he owned the air around him. His voice cut through the hum of the engine like a blade. At first it was just muttering, something about crowded buses and people who don't know their place. Then it got specific. He glanced toward the woman in scrubs, made a comment about her hair, how it took up too much room. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. One woman pulled her child closer. The bus driver kept his eyes on the road. The woman in scrubs didn't react. She'd heard it before. In parking lots and grocery store lines, even once in a pharmacy while picking up medicine for her grandmother. She'd learned long ago that responding often made things worse. So she stayed still, kept her breathing even, pretended she hadn't heard. Sometimes that worked, but not this time. The man stood up as the bus slowed for the next stop. He swayed slightly with the motion, his boots thudding against the floor. He walked down the aisle, not looking at anyone else, his eyes locked on her. When he reached her seat, he stopped. The bus was quiet now, no one dared speak. Even the usual background noise of coughing, rustling bags, or distant music seemed to vanish. "You think this is your personal lounge?" he said, voice low but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You blocking the whole row." She looked up at him then, calm but direct. "I'm not blocking anything," she said quietly. "There's plenty of room," he scoffed. "Yeah? Feels crowded to me." She didn't answer, just turned her gaze back to the window. That seemed to make him angrier. His jaw tightened. He leaned in slightly like he was trying to tower over her even though she was seated. "Don't ignore me," he snapped. Still, she said nothing. She knew this dance. Engaging would only feed him. So she stayed quiet, hoping the next stop would come soon, hoping he'd walk away. It didn't happen. As the bus pulled up to the corner of 55th and Halsted, the brakes hissed and the doors groaned open. That's when he moved. Without warning, without a word, he shoved her, hard. Not a nudge. Not a tap. A full-force push with both hands right on her shoulder. She gasped, caught off balance, and stumbled backward out of her seat. Her bag fell to the floor, spilling pens, a notebook, a small photo of her niece. She barely caught herself before tumbling down the bus steps, one hand grabbing the metal railing just in time. For a second, everything froze. The man stood there, arms crossed, smirking like he'd just pulled off a prank. A few passengers looked away. Others stared in shock but didn't move. The bus driver turned slightly in his seat, opened his mouth like he was going to say something, then closed it again. Outside, a couple walking by stopped mid-step. One of them raised a phone, not sure if they should record or intervene. The woman stood on the sidewalk now, heart pounding, cheeks burning, not just from embarrassment, but from the sudden, sharp sting of injustice. She brushed off her scrubs, picked up her bag slowly, and looked back at the bus. The man was still watching her, that same smirk on his face like he expected her to cry, to walk away ashamed, to disappear. But she didn't. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and instead of heading home like she'd planned, she turned and walked toward the nearest police station, just 2 blocks down. Her legs felt shaky, but her steps were steady. She didn't look back. Behind her, the bus doors closed with a sigh and the engine growled back to life. The man sat down in the seat she'd just left, acting like nothing had happened. But something had. Something real. Something that wouldn't stay buried just because he wanted it to. And though he didn't know it yet, those few seconds on the sidewalk would change more than just her day. They'd ripple outward in ways no one on that bus could have predicted. Not the silent passengers, not the hesitant driver, and certainly not the man in the leather vest who thought a shove was the end of the story. But it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The police station wasn't much to look at. Just a squat brick building with flickering fluorescent lights and a front desk that had seen better decades. She walked in still wearing her scrubs, her hair a little messy from the wind, her hands slightly trembling. Not from fear, not anymore, but from the raw, buzzing energy of someone who'd just crossed a line they never thought they would. She'd spent her whole life avoiding scenes, smoothing things over, choosing peace over pride. But this time peace felt like surrender, and she wasn't surrendering. The officer behind the desk looked up from his paperwork. Mid-40s, tired eyes, the kind of guy who'd probably heard every story under the sun and still managed to stay polite. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice calm. She nodded. "I need to file a report." He gestured to a chair. "Take a seat." What happened? She sat, folded her hands in her lap, and told him everything, starting from the moment she got on the bus, the comments, the stares, the shove. She didn't exaggerate, didn't raise her voice, just spoke plainly like she was recounting a recipe or giving directions. But her eyes stayed steady, and that told its own story. The officer listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back slightly, tapped his pen against the desk. "You got any witnesses?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "People were there, but no one said anything." He nodded like he'd expected that. "All right, let's get your statement down. And if anyone saw it, on video or in person, we'll need that too." She gave him the bus number, the time, the stop. He typed it all in, then asked for her contact info. She hesitated for just a second before giving it. Not because she was scared, but because part of her still wondered if this was worth the trouble. Would anyone even care? Would it go anywhere? But then she remembered the way her feet had nearly slipped off those bus steps, the way her heart had hammered like it was trying to escape her chest. And she knew she couldn't unsee it. Couldn't pretend it didn't happen. Back outside, the sun had dipped lower. The air smelled like roasted peanuts from a street vendor 2 blocks over, and exhaust from the evening traffic. She walked slowly, not toward home this time, but to a small park nearby. She needed to think, needed to breathe. She sat on a bench beneath a bare oak tree, watching kids chase each other near the swings while parents scrolled on their phones. Normal life, quiet life, the kind she'd always tried to protect. But now something had shifted. She felt exposed, yes, but also strangely clear, like a fog had lifted. Meanwhile, back on the bus route, the man in the leather vest didn't give the incident another thought. He got off a few stops later, met up with his friends at a diner, and laughed about it over coffee. "Had to teach that lady some manners," he joked, slapping the table. His friends chuckled, not because they agreed, but because it was easier than saying anything else. None of them asked if she was okay. None of them wondered what kind of day she'd had before he decided to make it worse. But someone had been watching, a teenager, maybe 16, wearing a hoodie and earbuds, had been sitting 3 rows behind the whole time. He'd pulled out his phone when the shouting started, not to be nosy, but because his older sister had taught him, "If you see something wrong, record it." Not to shame, to protect. He didn't post it right away. He showed it to his mom first. She watched it twice, then said, "This needs to be seen." By midnight, the clip was online. Just 30 seconds long, grainy, shaky, but clear enough. You could hear the man's voice, sharp and mocking. You could see the shove, the sudden stumble, the spilled bag, the silence that followed. The caption was simple. "This happened on the 55 bus today." She didn't do anything. It didn't go viral right away, but it spread. First to local community pages, then to neighborhood watch groups, then to a local news tip line. By morning, a reporter had called the transit authority asking for comment. The bus company, caught off guard, released a statement saying they take all reports of harassment seriously and were reviewing internal footage. The woman didn't know any of this yet. She woke up early, made tea, checked her clinic schedule, and almost convinced herself the whole thing had been a bad dream. But then her phone buzzed. A message from a coworker. "Is this you?" Attached was a screenshot of the video. Her stomach dropped. She opened the link. Watched it once. Then again. Seeing herself like that, vulnerable, off balance, made her cheeks burn. But then she noticed something else, the comments. Dozens of them. Hundreds even. "That's not okay. I've been there. Thank you for speaking up." One person wrote, "My mom got pushed off a train last year." No one helped her. "I'm glad someone's finally saying something." She didn't respond, didn't share it. But she saved the link, not for attention, for proof. Proof that she wasn't imagining things. Proof that what happened mattered. Across town, the man in the vest woke to a different kind of buzz. His boss calling, voice tight. "You're suspended indefinitely until this blows over." He argued, cursed, slammed his phone down. But the damage was done. His job at the motorcycle repair shop wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. And now, thanks to a stupid bus thing, it was gone. He still didn't get it. Not really. In his mind, it was just a push. Just words. Nothing serious. He didn't see the weight of it, the history behind it, the fear it echoed, the message it sent. To him, it was over the second she stepped off the bus. But for her and for others watching, it was just starting to unfold. By midday, a local activist group reached out. They wanted to help, offered legal support, media guidance, even a safe ride to work if she needed it. She thanked them but said she'd take it one step at a time. She wasn't looking to be a symbol. She just wanted to feel safe on a bus again. That afternoon, she returned to the clinic. Patients greeted her like always, but a few looked at her differently, not with pity but with quiet respect. One older woman squeezed her hand and whispered, "You did right, child." She didn't say more. Didn't need to. As the sun set, the video hit 50,000 views. News vans started circling the bus stop where it happened. Reporters asked neighbors if they knew her. Most said no, but they all said the same thing. It could have been any of us, and that was the point, wasn't it? It wasn't about one woman. It was about what happens when people stop looking away. When someone finally says, "No, not today." She didn't know what came next. Court, apologies, change. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of the city, the man in the vest sat alone too. Only his silence now felt heavier than hers ever had. The next morning, the city felt different. Not louder or brighter, but charged like the air before a storm finally breaks. The video was everywhere now. Not just on local pages, but shared by teachers, nurses, bus drivers, even a few city council members. It wasn't the kind of viral fame anyone wants. No dancing, no jokes, no filters. Just a raw, unedited moment of disrespect that too many recognized instantly. People weren't just watching. They were remembering their own versions of it. The time they stayed quiet. The time no one stepped in. The time they wished they'd done something. She woke to her phone lighting up like a holiday tree. Messages from strangers, old friends, even her cousin's high school principal offering support. One text stood out. "My daughter saw the video in class today." She said, "That could be my aunt. Thank you for showing her what courage looks like." She read it 3 times, then set the phone down gently like it might break if she held it too tight. She didn't plan to become a cause. She never asked for a spotlight. But now that it was on her, she wasn't going to duck. Not again. At the clinic, things moved slower than usual. Patients lingered after appointments just to say they were proud of her. One man brought her a thermos of homemade ginger tea. "For the nerves," he said. She smiled, accepted it, and didn't tell him her nerves weren't the problem. The problem was figuring out what to do next. The police had called back. They'd pulled the bus's internal footage. It matched the teen's video. They were opening a formal investigation. Assault, they called it. Not just a push, not a misunderstanding. Assault. Meanwhile, the man in the leather vest was scrambling. He'd tried calling his boss again, but the number was disconnected. His social media, mostly old photos of bikes and barbecues, was flooded with comments. Some were angry, some were sad. A few were threatening, and those got reported fast. He deleted his accounts, then posted a blurry statement on a friend's page. I didn't mean anything by it. It was just words. People are making a big deal out of nothing, but the city wasn't buying it. A retired school teacher who'd been on the same bus came forward. She'd been sitting near the front, pretending to read a book, heart pounding the whole time. I wanted to say something, she admitted in a short interview with a local paper. But I froze. I've been ashamed ever since. Now I'm speaking up, so maybe next time I won't freeze. Then the delivery driver spoke up, said he saw the whole thing from his van at the red light. She didn't say a word to him, he told a reporter. Just sat there minding her own business. And he treated her like trash. Even the bus driver, after days of silence, gave a statement through the transit union. I should have stopped the bus. Called it in right then. I didn't, I'm sorry. Each voice added weight, not just to the case, but to the conversation. People started talking in coffee shops, at laundromats, in group chats. Why do we let this happen? Why do we look away? She didn't attend any of the rallies that popped up near City Hall. Didn't post selfies with signs. But she did agree to meet with a group of transit workers who'd formed a safety committee after the video spread. They wanted her input. What would make riders feel safer, more seen? She listened more than she spoke, but when she did, they leaned in. Cameras help, she said. But people help more. If one person says something, even just, hey, that's not cool, it changes everything. Her words got quoted in a newsletter, then a podcast, then a short segment on the evening news. She never asked for any of it. But she didn't refuse it either. Because she realized something. Her silence used to feel like peace. Now it felt like permission. Back at his apartment, the man watched the news with the volume low. He saw her face on screen. Not angry, not dramatic, just calm, speaking about respect like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. And for the first time, he felt small. Not because of the backlash, but because he finally saw himself through someone else's eyes. Not as the tough guy on the bus, but as the reason someone had to walk 2 blocks to file a police report just to feel human again. He didn't apologize. Not yet. But he stopped making excuses. That was a start. Then came the breakthrough no one expected. The teenager who filmed it agreed to testify. His mom stood beside him when he gave his statement, hand on his shoulder. He wasn't scared, he said. Just tired of seeing people get treated like they don't matter. With his video, the bus footage, and 3 witness statements, the district attorney's office decided to press charges. Not just for disorderly conduct, for assault. It wasn't a guarantee of jail time, but it was accountability. Real, legal, on-the-record accountability. She got the call while folding laundry. Just a voice on the line. We're moving forward. She didn't cheer. Didn't cry. She just sat down on the edge of her bed and exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. That night, she called her grandmother, the woman who raised her after her parents passed. They talked for almost an hour. Her grandmother didn't say much about the case, just told her a story from 1963, about riding a bus in Alabama and being told to move to the back. I didn't move, she said softly. Not that day. And I never forgot how it felt to stand my ground even when my knees shook. They both knew the connection wasn't perfect, but it was real. Some battles change uniforms, but the fight stays the same. By the end of the week, the Transit Authority announced a new training program for drivers and staff, focused on de-escalation, bystander support, and recognizing harassment. They invited her to help design it. She said yes. And for the first time since that afternoon on the bus, she didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a part of something bigger. Not a hero, not a symbol. Just a person who said, this isn't right, and found out she wasn't the only one who felt that way. The story wasn't over. But the tide had turned. And sometimes that's enough to start healing. Weeks passed, and the noise around the incident didn't fade, it changed shape. The headlines grew quieter, but the conversations got deeper. People weren't just talking about what happened on the bus anymore. They were talking about what happens every day in grocery lines, on subway platforms, in office hallways. Those small, sharp moments when someone decides your presence is a problem. And how often no one says a word. She kept working at the clinic, still wearing her scrubs, still showing up early and staying late. But now when she walked down the street, strangers sometimes nodded at her. Not with pity, not with fanfare, just a quiet acknowledgement like they were saying, I see you. And I'm with you. It wasn't overwhelming. It was human. And that meant more than she expected. At home, she tried to keep things normal. Watered her plants, cooked meals that didn't come from a box, listened to old jazz records her grandmother used to play. But normal felt different now. She couldn't unknow what she'd learned, that speaking up didn't just change her life. It gave others permission to speak up too. One afternoon, a woman came into the clinic with her 2 young kids. She didn't have an appointment, just asked if she could talk for a minute. She stood near the front desk, twisting the strap of her bag, eyes darting like she was afraid someone would overhear. "I saw the video," she said softly, "and I needed to tell someone. Last month, a man followed me off the train yelling things. I ran, I never told anyone. Not even my husband." She paused, swallowed hard. "But seeing you, it made me feel like maybe I didn't have to be ashamed." They sat together in a quiet exam room for 20 minutes. No diagnosis, no prescription, just listening. When the woman left, she hugged her, quick and tight, like she was holding on to hope. That moment stayed with her longer than any news clip or interview request. Meanwhile, the man in the leather vest was trying to rebuild. He'd lost his job, his online reputation, even a few friends who said they couldn't support that kind of behavior. He spent his days fixing bikes in his garage, mostly for neighbors who didn't ask questions. He avoided the news, avoided the bus, avoided mirrors if he was honest with himself. Then came the court date. He showed up in a clean shirt, hair combed, hands shoved deep in his pockets like he was trying to disappear. He didn't bring a lawyer, not at first. Thought he could explain it away. But when he saw the prosecutor lay out the evidence, the video, the witness statements, the bus footage, he realized there was no explaining. Only facing it. In a brief statement to the judge, he mumbled something about not meaning harm and things getting out of hand. But the judge wasn't moved. "Intent doesn't erase impact," he said quietly. "And impact matters." The courtroom was small, but it felt huge to everyone inside. She sat in the front row, not because she wanted to watch him squirm, but because she needed to see it through, needed to know the system could work even a little. When the judge announced the charges would stand, she didn't smile. She just nodded once like she was closing a door. Afterward, outside the courthouse, reporters asked her how she felt. She didn't give a speech. Just said, "I hope this helps someone else feel safe enough to speak up next time." Back at the Transit Authority, planning for the new Rider Respect program was moving fast. They'd brought in counselors, community leaders, even former riders who'd experienced harassment. She joined the weekly meetings not as a victim, but as a voice. She suggested simple things: clearer signage about reporting incidents, a button on the bus app to alert dispatch quietly, even training for drivers on how to intervene without escalating. "It's not about catching bad people," she said during one session. "It's about making good people feel safe enough to act." Her ideas got written into the pilot program, and when they tested it on 3 bus lines, riders reported feeling more secure. Not because the world had changed overnight, but because someone was finally listening. One evening, she got a call from the teenager who filmed the video. He sounded nervous. "My school's doing a project on civic courage," he said. "Can I interview you? Not for fame or anything, just so my class understands it's real people, not just headlines." She said yes. They met at a library downtown. He asked thoughtful questions, not about the shove, but about what came after. "How did you keep going when it felt scary?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "Because I remembered I wasn't alone," she said. "Even when it felt like I was." He wrote a powerful essay. His teacher read it aloud to the whole grade. A few students cried. Not from sadness, from recognition. As fall turned toward winter, the city felt different in small, steady ways. Bus drivers started greeting riders by name. More people sat near someone being harassed, just to show solidarity. A local artist painted a mural near the bus stop where it happened. Not of her, but of hands reaching out, faces looking out for each other. No words, just care, made visible. She walked past it every Thursday on her way to volunteer at a youth center. Sometimes kids would point and say, "That's because of you, right?" She'd shake her head. "No," she'd say. "It's because of all of us," and that was the truth. This wasn't her story alone anymore. It belonged to the teacher who finally spoke up, to the delivery driver who stepped forward, to the teen with the phone, to the grandmother who taught her to stand tall, to every person who chose kindness over silence. The man in the vest never reached out to apologize, not directly. But months later, through his lawyer, He agreed to participate in the Transit Authority's restorative justice pilot. He'd meet with staff, listen to stories, and help design part of the bystander training, not as a speaker, but as a listener. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start. She didn't need him to be a hero. She just needed him to understand, and maybe in time he would. For now, she kept showing up, on buses, at work, in her community, not as a symbol, but as herself. Tired sometimes, hopeful most days, human always. Because real change doesn't come from grand speeches or viral videos. It comes from ordinary people choosing again and again to say, "This matters. I matter, we all do." Spring came softly that year, with longer days and the kind of light that made even cracked sidewalks look hopeful. The court case had wrapped months ago. No jail time, but real consequences. Community service, mandatory counseling, and a public apology read aloud at a city transit meeting. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was accountability. And sometimes that's enough to plant a seed. She didn't attend the apology. Not because she didn't believe in second chances, but because she'd already moved on. Not away from what happened, but toward what could come next. The Rider Respect program she helped design was now running on nearly half the city's bus lines. Drivers wore small pins that said, "Ask me," to signal they were trained to help. There were posters inside every bus, not with rules, but with messages like, "You belong here," and "If you see something, say something kindly." Riders reported feeling safer. Not because threats disappeared, but because silence no longer ruled the space. She still worked at the clinic, still wore her scrubs, still came home tired. But now, on Thursday afternoons, she also volunteered with a youth group that taught teens how to respond when they witnessed disrespect. Not with anger, but with calm, clear action. "You don't have to be loud," she told them. "You just have to be present." One rainy Thursday, a girl raised her hand. "What if I'm scared?" she asked. She smiled. "Then you're human." But courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing even when your hands shake. The girl nodded, wrote that down in her notebook. Months earlier, that same girl might have stayed quiet on a bus. Now she carried a card in her wallet with steps to take if someone's being mistreated. Small things, big impact. Meanwhile, the man in the leather vest had finished his community service hours, painting benches at a community center, sorting donations at a shelter. He kept his head down, didn't seek attention. But he did show up, every week, on time. No excuses. His counselor noted progress, not dramatic, but steady. He'd started attending a men's group focused on respect and responsibility. He hadn't spoken much, but he listened. And sometimes listening is the first real step toward change. He never tried to contact her, never posted online about moving on or being canceled. He just lived with what he'd done and tried quietly to be better. That wasn't forgiveness, but it was growth. And growth matters. One afternoon, she got an unexpected invitation. Speak at a citywide youth forum on civic courage. Not as a victim, not as a hero, just as someone who chose to act. She almost said no, she hated the spotlight. But then she remembered the teenager with the phone, the woman at the clinic, the kids in the library asking honest questions. This wasn't about her. It was about passing the torch. The night of the event, the auditorium was full. Not with cameras or reporters, but with students, teachers, parents, bus drivers, even a few city officials. She walked on stage in simple clothes, no notes, just her truth. "I'm not here because I'm special," she began. "I'm here because I was tired. Tired of pretending it didn't hurt when people treated me like I didn't belong. Tired of watching others get pushed aside and saying nothing. So I did the smallest thing I could. I walked to the police station. That's it. No grand plan, no speech. Just one step." She paused, looked out at the faces, and that one step led to another. And another. Not because I was brave, but because other people joined me. The teen who filmed it. The teacher who spoke up. The driver who finally said he was sorry. Real change doesn't come from one person. It comes from many people choosing again and again to care. Afterward, kids lined up to talk to her. One boy said, "My uncle says stuff like that man said." "What do I do?" She knelt so they were eye level. "You don't have to fix him," she said gently. "But you can choose not to repeat it. And you can stand beside people who are hurting. That's how we build something better." Later, as she walked home under streetlights just starting to flicker on, she passed the mural near the bus stop, the one with the hands reaching out. Someone had left a single sunflower at its base. She didn't know who. Didn't need to. It was enough that someone remembered. Life didn't become perfect. Buses still got crowded. People still said unkind things. But something had shifted. Not in the world overnight, but in the way people moved through it. More eye contact. More "you okay?" More willingness to step in even in small ways. She still took the bus. Always sat near the window. Sometimes when it rumbled down 55th Street, she'd glance at the spot where it happened. Not with fear. Not with anger. Just with quiet knowing. That moment hadn't broken her. It had revealed her, and in doing so reminded others of their own strength. Back at her apartment, she made tea, watered her plants, and opened a letter from her cousin. Inside was a college acceptance letter, and a note. "You showed me that speaking up isn't weakness. It's love. Thank you." She folded the note carefully and placed it in the same drawer as the police report, not as reminders of pain but as proof that ordinary people can change the story. The city kept turning. Buses kept running. And somewhere on a quiet street, a woman in scrubs walked home not as a headline but as herself, tired, tender, and true, because real courage isn't loud. It's showing up. It's staying kind when it's hard. It's believing that one person's voice, however quiet, can start a ripple that becomes a wave. And sometimes, that wave carries us all toward something better.